it counts among the biggest gold deposits in the world. And now, 30 years after we first found the deposit, it still hasn't been worked in any way. We could say nobody's yet put a shovel in the ground.
Welcome to Polar Podcasts, where you'll hear stories from geologists who've spent their careers, their lives, exploring and studying the remarkable and remote geology of Greenland. Why did they become fascinated with Greenland? What were the problems and the discoveries that drove them? And what was it like working in these remote places, where few people venture, even now? I'm Julie Hollis. In this episode, we hear more from Kent Brooks, Emeritus Professor at the Geological Museum in Copenhagen. After a sabbatical working in Papua New Guinea in the mid-1980s, Kent returned to working in East Greenland, and the next phase in the story of understanding the Skaergaard intrusion, discovering gold.
Well, I'd returned from Papua New Guinea in the summer of 1986, and GTU were having an expedition to East Greenland at that time, and I was hired to as a sort of economic geologist. The idea was that the mapping geologists, when they went around, if they found something of economic interest, they would not waste time on that, but they would tell me about it, and I would go and look at it. And in this way I came to look at a number of things like rubies in metamorphic rocks south of Massilik, perils in the granites around Sabbatical, and several promising economic prospects around Skaergaard in the Kangerlussuaq area. Well, I was contacted by a chap called Bob Gannicott, who had set up a company, a Canadian, actually a Brit, who'd emigrated to Canada and set up a company there called Platinova. And he'd seen a paper that I wrote back in 1973, I think, on the plate tectonic situation in East Greenland, in which I'd pointed out that the Kangerlussuaq fjord might be what was called a failed arm. It was a rift valley which had failed to spread.
When continents break up, they move apart, forming rift valleys. In some cases, there are 3 rifts that meet at a central point, but sometimes one of those rifts will stop spreading apart. This is called a failed rift.
Well, the other 2 rift valleys spread to form the North Atlantic Ocean. Well, this caught his eye because somewhere people believed that ore deposits might be found in failed arms. And so he'd taken out a concession on the area, and he suggested that we work together. The survey and his company worked together. Well, that was okay. And at that time he worked under incredibly primitive conditions. He came with two young Canadian guys, and they shared the helicopter rides with us and that. And they lived in a camp which was largely consisted of a tarpaulin strung from a sandstone cliff, and that was okay if the weather was good. But when it poured down, there tended to be a waterfall coming down the cliff face on one side of the room they were living in. Anyhow, we decided that Skaergaard was not really a very interesting place to look at because it had already been studied in detail. That a much more promising place to look would be the Cape Edward Holm intrusion, which is many times larger than Skaergaard and had not been looked at in much detail. And we thought there might be ore deposits associated with that. Well, I belonging to the survey in Platinova. We spent a lot of time going over the Cape Edward Holm intrusion, and then we had a period of bad weather, and Bob, who was reluctant to have his 2 young Canadians being paid by him and not doing anything, suggested they fitted in the time by going to Skaergaard. At this time we couldn't fly across the fjord because of bad visibility, but we could flit from the camp in Sørdal and down to Skaergaard quite easily. So he put his 2 chaps on to looking at Skaergaard, and they went around and collected stream sediment samples and grab samples and things, and really it was a bit of occupational therapy. Anyhow, I was quite surprised when he called me up. I mean, the survey was slow in getting assays done. Quite naturally, Platinova, they had assays of the summer samples done within weeks of getting back to Canada. And Bob called me up and said, well, you know what the most promising thing is we found all the summer? He said it was the stream sediment samples we took at Skaergaard below Verbinder's glacier, they all returned high gold anomalies. Well, that was a new one on me. And it was decided that we would go next year and chase this up. The Greenland Survey had backed out of it by now, so I was back running expeditions for the university on research council money. Anyhow, it was a rather classic example of geochemical prospecting, because they took the sediment samples from Verbinder's glacier and analysed them and saw there were gold anomalies in there, and then we used our nous to figure out why the gold anomalies were there, and we quickly worked out they were coming from an area up on the side of the mountain above, and we localised a thin horizon which had elevated gold values. At the time, we took samples at vertical profiles of samples at about half a metre intervals, and then sent them off to Toronto. We had a plane connection once a week on Saturday. We sent off the samples one Saturday, and then we got the results back the following Saturday. And we quickly found that there was a horizon there with very elevated gold contents. I don't want to quote any figures right now because I can't remember them, but there were marked gold peaks in there, and it was of great interest. And we always got the results on a Saturday, and so Saturday night we got good big numbers back, and we always had a party on Saturday night where we sang and drank in the cook tent and did press-ups and other manly sports. And on Sunday morning, Bob, the president, would cook us eggs Benedict if the gold numbers were good. Yes, well, that was the first year, or the second year, should we say, 1987. And obviously, when we'd got this far, the next thing to do would be to drill it. And Platinova started drilling the following year, and made several drill holes, up to 1 kilometre in length. And I was always surprised by this. I mean, I was told when I was a student that the geothermal gradient,
the increasing temperature with increasing depth beneath the surface of the Earth.
The geothermal gradient is about 30 degrees per kilometre, and I guess you don't think too much about this when you're a student, but when you're standing in the freezing temperatures in East Greenland, and you have water coming up out of a kilometre deep drill hole, and it's 30 degrees warm, you think, what the hell is this hot water doing here? Well, I mean, you know that if you go down a kilometre, it's going to be 30 degrees. It's quite simple. But somehow when you're talking to the student, it doesn't sink in. Anyway, Platinova did drilling for several years there, and they subsequently branched out and started looking at Cap Edward Holm again. And then they pulled out because they got more interested in the zinc deposits at Citronenfjord and various other schemes that Bob had. When we found gold in the Skaergaard intrusion, I thought that it would be reasonable that people in Greenland knew that they might have an important gold mine in the near future. I was very optimistic in those days, and I knew very well that mining companies don't like publicity unless they're able to manage it themselves. So I was quite aware that if I wrote something in the papers, it would not be approved of. But anyhow, I decided to do it. So I wrote this article, which was designed for Jyllands-Posten, the Aarhus newspaper. I decided to go there because the Aarhus newspaper is rather more interested in Greenlandic stuff than the Copenhagen newspapers. And I happened to be in Aarhus, and I took the article I'd written down to the paper office on a Thursday, I think it was, and delivered it to them. They said, we won't be publishing it this Sunday. It was designed for the Sunday edition, I should say. We won't be publishing it this Sunday. We've got something this Sunday, and we're filled up for this Sunday, but we'll keep it by us and publish it in the coming time, sometime when we have space. Anyhow, I went away, and they went back home maybe on the Friday. On the Sunday morning, I amazed the telephone rang at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they said, this is TV2. Can we do an interview with you now? And I said, I was still in bed, and not really. and I was confused, and they put the phone down, and then come 9 o'clock they rang again and they said, "We've just landed in Kastrup and we're on our way up to see you." So I think TV2 were based in Odense or somewhere in those at that time. I don't quite remember. But lo and behold, just after 9 o'clock, this TV crew arrived, journalists and cameramen and all the paraphernalia. What the hell is it all about? They said it's about this gold in Greenland. And so my daughter, who generally went out, in those days she was a teenager, went out on the town, and she generally didn't get up until lunchtime on Sundays. She became aware there was a TV crowd in there, and so she got up and put some makeup on and came down and made herself useful. And I sat there and gave an interview about the gold in Greenland, and it was a nightmare. The phone rang 3 or 4 times during the day, and then at 11 o'clock at night, suddenly the ring on the door, where it turned out to be journalists from Billedblad, or Extrabladet, what's it called, Extrabladet, and they wanted an interview too. And so anyhow, I'd finished. It was about 1 o'clock before I'd finished with them. Oddly enough, Extrabladet, they produced what turned out to be one of the most accurate descriptions of what I'd said of any newspaper. They're famed for publishing topless girls and sex stories and things like that. And I think with some justification it could be called the gutter press. But in this particular case, they didn't actually say much. But everything they said was completely accurate. And I always recall the journalist saying to the photographer, "Ta många bilder, det ska vara något luft mellan texter. Take a lot of pictures. There should be some air in the text." Anyhow, I found out next morning that the whole of the Danish press was filled with stories about riches of gold in Greenland, and the telephone was ringing from morning till night, and even the Wall Street Journal had an article there saying that Kent Brooks had found one of the world's biggest gold deposits. I never at any point in my career suggested it was me that found it, but anyhow, that's the way Wall Street Journal reported it. And it is in fact what we call a mega deposit. It is one of the world's largest gold deposits. It's a low-grade deposit. The gold levels are very, very low, but on the other hand, there's an enormous tonnage of material, so the total gold is very, very great. It counts among the biggest gold deposits in the world. Unfortunately, because the stuff is so disseminated, the gold is so disseminated, it has to, it requires a lot of investment, a large mining operation to get it out. And now, 30 years after we first found the deposit, it still hasn't been worked in any way. I could say nobody's yet put a shovel in the ground. So that was the story of gold. Well, there's more to that actually. I should talk about the Greenlandic dispute. One of the reasons for making it public was so that Greenlanders would know what was going on, and particularly in Tasiilaq, if a mine came there, this would of course be a great source of employment to them, and it would be of interest to them. But immediately a controversy broke out between Tasiilaq and Itakotormit, where the Tasiilaq claimed that the gold deposit was in their commune, whereas Itakotormit claimed that the Kommune Grense,
the municipal boundary,
went down the centre of Kangerlussuaq Fjord, so it was actually an Itakotormit commune. And Tasiilaq argued that it must be in their commune because they'd financed hunting parties to go there, and it was clearly part of their commune. And it was 400 kilometres from Itakotormit, and no people from Itakotormit had ever been that far, so it couldn't possibly be part of their commune. And I went to a meeting out in Lyngby for the Scoresby Sund Committee, it's called, where the mayor of Tasiilaq, Jakob Sivertsen, and the mayor of Itakotormit, Amelia Masson, went at it against each other, hammer and tongs, where Amelia shouted at Jakob, "You're a liar, talk like that." Anyhow, this was a lot of political stuff was set in motion here. Jakob Sivertsen, for example, wanted to blame Platinova for driving up the wildlife. The hunters there had found over the years the number of bears they killed had gone down from 100, 120 or so a year to something like 5 a year, and they ascribed this to the fact that Platinova had flown their helicopter over and had driven the bears away. There are, in fact, other interpretations. Anyhow, I think it was Johan Chemnitz, the self-styled president of Greenland.
This should actually be Jonathan Motzfeldt,
who took this up, and he knew that Stanford University, California, a rich university, and my colleague Dennis Bird from Stanford, who'd worked with me in Platinova and various others on the Skaergaard gold deposit, had been quite prominent there, and he decided that maybe this was a line of action. So he raised a lawsuit against the president of Stanford University for the recompense of $1 million for the loss of hunting rights around Kangerlussuaq. And Dennis was really upset. He got called up to the president's office and a lawsuit of $1 million had been made against him. Anyhow, this was all quietened down for a while because I believe, I don't know exactly how it happened, but somebody presumably in Copenhagen told Chemnitz,
actually Jonathan Motzfeldt,
that that he couldn't do this sort of thing, that the home rule in Greenland at that time was not allowed to participate in international politics. That international politics would be handled from Copenhagen. It may well be different now, but in those days the government in Nuuk had nothing to do with defence, actually also minerals at that time, and foreign relations and one or two other things. But anyhow, the whole thing had stirred up this hornet's nest where people were at each other's throats and looking at opportunities to raise money from it, all kinds of pretences. And some years later, I happened to be at Skaergaard in the summertime. There was these motorboats from Tasiilaq were up there, and I saw that Jakob Sivertsen was there, and I thought, well, we had this without a feud going, but I don't think he'll recognise me. And I had a chat to him, and I thought, no, he doesn't recognise me. He says, he's not complaining anyway. It's all very well. But then suddenly he said, "Oh, I had a member of Folketing medlem with me."
a member of the Danish Parliament.
Can't now remember his name. It was the one who was in charge of science in Folketing, and he said, what's his name? Jakob said, "There's me. I'm mayor of Tasiilaq. There's him. He's a member of Folketing, and there's him. He's a good doctor."
A gold doctor.
So we know what we're talking about, don't we? So it became quite clear that Jakob Sivertsen didn't know who I was.
I'm Julie Hollis, and you've been listening to Polar Podcasts. In the next episode, we hear from Professor Alan Nutman about starting out in the 1970s as a field assistant, leading to lifelong Greenland research on some of the world's oldest rocks.